Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard. At the Beyond Africa podcast, we share African stories that change lives. Today, we're taking a completely different format for this podcast. And the reason is certain issues have been handled in a way that I would want us to use different sources of information and a different approach to reflection. This would help us see the insights and the mindsets of those who are championing issues for the moment and how Cameroonians should respond to these issues. The fundamental is the same, and that fundamental is attaining justice as the outcome of the elections, attaining the truth, speaking the truth, and let the truth represent the outcome of the elections. Let Cameroonians feel that their voices, as expressed at the ballot box, have been heard. That is the simple reason for choosing this approach. So, our conversation today has three headings. The first is "The truth shall set you free." The second is about false prophets. And the third is about the signs of the time. This is very important. As usual, thank you so much for subscribing, liking, sharing, and commenting. That is the best way you help us. Kindly share this particular podcast out and let people know what we're talking about. The information here is very useful because it comes from an angle that we do not discuss on this platform. Recently, we have heard Atanganji Paul use scripture to defend his position, to send his message across. We often hear that Karl Marx said that religion is the opium of the people. And this interpretation has given people the notion that when you use religion, people tend to forget reality. So, having spoken about Karl Marx, let us go to talk about Atanganji Paul. I have retained two of his statements. The first statement I retained is, "Power comes from God, all authority comes from God, and therefore Paul Biya was given to Cameroonians by God." The second scripture, or the second religious or biblical lesson he wants us to have, is to believe that God gives you what he knows is good for you. He used the example of a car. If you want to buy a car and God knows that you would use that car and unfortunately get into an accident, God may decide not to give you that car, but then God will give you money to construct a house. That was an anecdote that he used to tell Cameroonians that despite the fact that you Cameroonians voted for Chiruma, God decided to make Paul Biya your president, because if Chiruma is a driver of the nation, you would get into an accident. Do you want to believe that, or do you not want to believe that? I leave it up to you to judge. You tell me in the comments section what you think. I want us to go into some scripture. The first scripture is the Gospel of St. John, chapter 8, verses 31 and 32. So, Jesus said to those who believed in him, "If you obey my teaching, you are really my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." In John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Jesus is very clear. He is the truth, and if you want to know the truth, you must look up to him. The truth in the electoral context we are talking about is the verdict from the ballot box. What did the ballot box produce as outcome? If you want to know the truth, because Jesus is truth, you need to go back to the ballot box and show us your PVs, polling station by polling station. Show us who won in every polling station. That is the best way you can ascertain the truth. That is the best way you can show to Cameroonians that you are for the truth. You cannot quote scripture on one hand and ignore scripture on another hand. If the essence of your scripture is to go to the Father, you must go to the Father through Jesus. And Jesus is the truth. In the electoral context, the truth is the result from the ballot box. That is very simple. The truth is not the results declared by the Constitutional Council. The truth is what came out of the ballot box. So if Atanganji believes that he is scriptural enough, he should remember that Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. And only the truth shall set he, Atanganji, the CPDM, the Constitutional Council, Elecam, Paul Biya, and all those around them free. And how shall that freedom come? Simply go to the polling station, get the results from all the polling stations, let's compare them, let's see them. Chiruma published his. So if Atanganji, who has become the pastor, the priest, the prophet, wants us to believe that he is referencing the truth and the Bible, let us see his PVs. Then we compare those with what Chiruma has given to us. The second scripture we are reading comes from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 12, verses 54 to 58. Jesus also said to the crowds, "When you see clouds forming in the west, you immediately say, 'It is going to rain.' And indeed, it does rain. And when a south wind blows, you say, 'Aha, a heat wave is coming.' And indeed, it does. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret conditions on earth and in the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret the present time? And why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? As you are going to court with your accuser, make your best effort to reach a settlement along the line. Otherwise, your accuser will bring you before the judge, and the judge hand you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into jail. And I tell you most solemnly, you won't get out of prison until you have paid the very last cent." This scripture sounds very important at this material moment in Cameroon's life. We'll take it bit by bit. Jesus says, when you see a cloud forming or the winds blow, you understand it is either going to rain or it's going to be a heat wave. But what is the point here? What are the signs we are seeing right now? After 43 years of Paul Biya's rule, the signs are visible. Cameroonians are ready to have a change in government. Who is not seeing that? Now, the question comes back to over-reliance on one person. It is true that the truth from the ballot box says that Chiruma won the election. Chiruma represents that image of change. So, the times are ripe for Cameroonians to understand that the change needed is not about Chiruma, it is simply about Cameroonians. By this, Cameroonians need to take the leadership of the change that they need. Chiruma is a figure in the whole thing. He is simply the head. He is simply that person who holds the legitimacy from the ballot box. Therefore, you watching now, read the time. The time says Cameroon's time for change is now. If this moment passes by, Cameroonians would have to deal with what they have dealt with since 1960, maybe for the next 50, 60, 70, or 100 years. While Chiruma is the face because he got the legitimacy, Cameroonians need to start thinking about having the change they so much want and the change they have worked for. It is important that Cameroonians think, set themselves at the level where the change they want is them, is they themselves, and it's not Chiruma. Chiruma is an individual. The truth from the ballot box stays steady. It remains vital and viable. How should Cameroonians take the mantle into their hands? Chiruma is the face. Everyone is looking at Chiruma, looking up to Chiruma, but he is just the face. And Cameroonians are the body. They embody that movement, that change that they want to see. Threats should not stop Cameroonians from believing in themselves. The Times have said that Cameroonians should believe in themselves because they hold the power. That is what the signs of the time are telling us right now. Let's go to the next. Jesus asked these people, how is it that you don't know how to interpret the time? And why do you judge for yourselves what time is right? Do we need to belabor this? Jesus is saying this today, here and now, to Cameroonians. Jesus is asking you two things. The first, how is it that you don't know how to interpret the present time? The present time is in your hands. Look up for leadership. Look up to Chiruma, but know that the change is in your hands. There are different actions you can take to bring that change. The second question Jesus is asking is, why don't you judge for yourselves what time is right? You don't need a Tanganji to tell you what time is right. It is evident. The ballot box had spoken. The mass mobilization around Chiruma during the campaign, during the protests, and during the ghost towns are very evident that Chiruma is the man for the moment. The man for the moment, not because without him everything dies, but because without him, Cameroonians have shown that this is their moment, this is the time, and Cameroonians are ready for that change. There is no need questioning whether this is the time or not, and there is no need listening to prophets of doom who are trying to quell people down. Jesus has a particular way of telling Cameroonians that this is the moment. Chiruma was a member of that same government. He resigned, came to Cameroonians, made peace with Cameroonians. Cameroonians forgave him, and Cameroonians now see him as the head of that movement that brings that change. Are you getting what Jesus is telling Cameroonians here? This is the time for change. That is why Chiruma left and came. And that is why he has been forgiven. So it is on two different fronts. Chiruma resigned. He came. Then he was forgiven. Is it obvious that if the others resign and come, they will be forgiven? These signs are not only for Cameroonians. They are also for those who have been in power all this while and abusing power, insulting power, and making Cameroonians feel they are not worthy, feel they are not children of God. This is the time, and the signs are all over. Everyone is pumped up. Everyone wants change, and that change is at the footsteps of Cameroon. Now, let's talk about false prophets. False prophets. Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 to 20. False prophets and true disciples. On these, Jesus tells his listeners, be on guard against false prophets who come to you disguised in sheep's clothing, but who inwardly are dangerous wolves. By their fruits you will know them. Does one pick grapes from a thorn bush or figs from an orange tree? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but a rotten tree produces bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruits we shall know them. Once you do not walk towards that change, you will definitely be one of those bad trees that will be cut off and thrown into the fire. There is no need wasting your future. There is no need wasting your time. So let's break this down again. Jesus starts by saying, be on guard against false prophets who come to you disguised in sheep's clothing, but who inwardly are dangerous wolves. We are doing this entire reflection on the Bible because Atanganji has made it a point of order to be a pastor and a prophet. When it is not our place to judge, Jesus tells us, but when you see, you know. When you see the bad fruit, you know it. This is the same person who said Chiruma should know that he does not live in a bunker and he's going to be picked up and treated in the most inhumane ways. Then he comes up the next day and picks up scriptural verses and is reading them, and we laugh. Jesus goes further to say, they would come to you in sheepskin, but they are wolves. Just take God. Every day they tell you that anybody who tells you to go down to the street is manipulating you and is sending you to go die. If elections were not rigged, no one would have been revendicating anything. No one would have been asking for anything. The problem is elections were rigged. You rigged the elections and you come on to blame different people because they are claiming the victory that came out of the ballot box. You appear docile because you cite scripture. You appear soft because you put the blame on another person. But inwardly, you know what you have done. Inwardly, you know you sent gendarmes to kill. If not, why did you have to tell Chiruma in a press conference that he does not live in a bullet-protected house or that he does not live in a bunker? Because you knew what you were going to do. You've said it many times on radio. You are the Molinex. You're going to send bees. You're going to send a hungry snake to deal with the people. By your fruits, we are seeing whom you are. So by the time someone comes up and says, this man is quoting scripture because he knows what he's talking and is a good man, send him to this scripture. Refer him to the Bible. What you are saying, how much of that fruit represents what you do? By their fruits, we shall know them. And why does Jesus use the imagery of fruits? Because every tree produces fruit and you see the fruits. You see the fruits. You see the fruits when insects have infested that fruit. You see the fruit. What somebody says, how somebody behaves, you see them as part of the fruits. There is no way you would tell anyone, any Cameroonian who sees that this is the time, this is the moment for change, that they should forget, oh, no, those elections, it's Jiruma who is sending people to the streets. He is drugging Cameroonians. He is manipulating Cameroonians to go to the streets. And before I end, I want us to talk about the young 5th deputy mayor of Douala, 5e Douala 6e, Beyond Joseph Espoir. That gentleman, he mustered courage and said on TV that the elections were rigged. He shared results from his personal research that say Chiruma won the elections. Immediately he did that, he was summoned by the SDO of Uri. I have a different topic. We're going to talk about SDOs at a later conversation. But when there is no freedom of speech, this causes problems and people start feeling the pain of insult, dehumanization, and abuse. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said, riots are simply the language of the unheard. Beyond said on TV something very clear that everybody knows, and he's being threatened. This is what happened. Last week, it was Balafon TV and Equinox TV. They called them and threatened them. Now it is Beyond. Then in prison, we have Anissa Ekane, Jokam Kameni, Fabrice Lena, and all the other souls simply for expressing their political opinions. Cameroonians have actually said, this is the time for change. This is the moment. They are reading the signs. Time for change should definitely get themselves ready. Because as I said recently, Chiruma is working. He's going to say whatever he's going to say. But Cameroonians should know that at this material moment, Chiruma or no Chiruma, it is time for change, and Cameroonians should be working towards that change. What a time to be alive. What a time to follow Cameroonian politics. I have been your host, Ngalim Bernard, with the Beyond Africa podcast. See you in our next episode. As usual, thank you so much for liking, commenting, sharing. That is where we find our energy to come to you with all this information. Have the best of day.